and be safe from the relegation tournament. Playoffs will be great, but in order to get there, they pretty much have to go over Team Dignitas, since that's one of the main teams they're competing for that spot with.
Right, when you're comparing Team Dignitas to P1, to TSM, to the recently rough but previously very shiny FlyQuest, there's a few questions in there, and Liquid are going to be looking to provide some answers in solid form today. We'll have to see how patch 7.5 changes up the pick and ban phase as well.
Oh, and I'm so excited for this, especially with DoubleLift coming back into the league. The Blade of the Ruined King changes, I think, are one of the less hyped moves coming into this patch, because everyone was talking about the LeBlanc and the Ryze nerfs, but I feel like that brings Kalista right back into the meta. It's also a great first item on Lucian, who had some late game changes to his cast times that make him better. And those are two champions that DoubleLift has historically excelled on. So I would love to see the AD carry position be true to its name and not necessarily just be the bot lane.
The lethality poke position?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would love to see, after I initially saw a clip on Reddit of the new cast time Lucian and how clean he can look with 40% cooldown, I would love to see some hyper carry kind of a Lucian. But we'll have to wait and see if either one of the teams is up for that this time around. Bans 2/3 of the way done in the first phase. Rumble, Camille, and Graves banned away by Dignitas. Liquid taking Elise and Shen off the table with one more still to go.
Yeah, and you can see with Team Dignitas' bans, they're very heavily targeting the top side of Team Liquid's map. Lourlo actually has had some pretty darn good performances on Rumble and Camille. Not to mention, I feel like ReignOver's look better on Graves than any other jungler. So it's interesting that they're kind of target banning the two people who have been on Liquid the entire split, rather than the guys who have been role swapping or recently brought into the team.
Yep, final ban on the side of Liquid is going to be Lee Sin, targeted towards that jungle as well. Rengar being hovered by Dignitas, thinking about locking that one in. Now switches back to the Lulu, which has been very popular recently.
We're seeing Lulu pretty much everywhere, it feels like. The Arden Sensor build paired with an attack speed focused AD carry has been so crazy. It's almost like you just have those things and suddenly you're putting together this protect the carry composition, although you still have a lot of flexibility. It was high priority last week. No surprise, it's super high priority right now.
Lourlo thinking about the Nautilus there in the top lane. Could potentially see it other places as well, but by and large, Nautilus is a top laner at this point in time. So locking that one in for Team Liquid, going to go ahead and beef up the front line first and foremost. Considering we do have two very different roles locked in at the start, we might not see matching everything in the first phase of the draft.
Yeah, exactly. And the Ezreal is a strong pick here for DoubleLift as well. It's not the Kalista or Lucian I was hoping to see, but if you look at DoubleLift's return last week, he played 5 games. He played Jhin 3 times, in which his kills never were more than 2 in a game. He played Draven once, where he got 1 kill. Then he played Ezreal, and he hard carried the game with 8 or 10 kills. It was by far the best champion for him last week, and it puts him in a position to carry.
And changes like this that bring in a different style of champion back into the game can really make things go all over the place with which players seem like the best and which players seem like they've got some work to do. Just because the way the meta can favor or not favor you can have a huge impact.
Yeah, and speaking of the meta favoring or not favoring you, the Gragas has been someone who's slowly creeping up there in a jungle and a top lane position. No flexing in this case since they've already had the Rengar, and it's going to be a tank v tank matchup in the top lane. Going to get to see some Ssumday Gragas.
Looks like Liquid is thinking about the Kha'Zix, going to go ahead and lock that one in against the Rengar, the classic lore showdown between the junglers. But that does also mean, like I mentioned earlier, you're not going to have mirrored picks during the first part of this draft. The jungle and top lane picked up by both sides, but it's support versus AD carry, so those zones might be pinched out a little bit more.
Exactly, but what's interesting about that is, based on some things I've heard from DoubleLift in interviews, he doesn't fear Laud's bottom lane champion pool, so Team Liquid might just be saying, we're not even going to bother trying to ban out that AD carry, even though it's mismatched. Instead, they're going to target bans at Keane, who has been a good performer for Team Dignitas in recent weeks, while being an underperformer for most of the split, and that's where we're seeing almost all of this ban phase 2 coming at, is the mid lane.
Honestly, this recent surge from Dignitas, a lot of it has been thanks to better and better performances by Keane and by Chaser, really stepping up and performing for the team. And it's understandable why you would want to try to ban some champions away from the Victor and Cassiopeia, removed by Team Liquid. Ahri, the ban from Dignitas. They have 1 left, and it doesn't even go through. Okay.
Missed ban. That's so interesting. I kind of agree with you there when you say missing a ban. is bad, because people will go through and say, oh, there's nothing important that we wanted to ban, we want to keep their options open. There is always something that you are not going to play that limits the options of your opponent.
Right.
And it's silly not to do that.
It is.
Right there. And I'm hearing through the magic of production that was actually an intentional no ban from Team Dignitas, but I just don't agree.
No, I can't agree with that whatsoever. It's like the people that take pictures of themselves on Twitter, oh, I took this on accident. Whoops, my bad. It's like, oh yeah, we just left this open. It was actually on purpose. No, there has to be a better option than simply leaving it open. But Dignitas will be going with that this time. DoubleLift picking up the Vlad for Piglet.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because so often you'll see the mid lane pick saved for the final slot, but with Keane having that successful Vladimir game last week, Piglet just sees that as a safe blind pick based on the things they've already banned. That's essentially what Team Liquid's Phase 2 of bans was building towards, was just getting rid of the things that Piglet wouldn't want to play Vladimir against and then locking it in quick.
Well, Dignitas going to go ahead, finally get the carries on their roster with a Caitlyn and an Orianna pickup to round out the draft.
Yeah, and this is a scary type of team composition when you are Team Dignitas, because the Caitlyn Lulu wins a lot of lanes. Orianna is a strong laner, so this is actually fairly similar to a composition we're going to see a lot of if these bans don't change, because you have two shielding champions that give you a great late game insurance with the fed Caitlyn, as well as having multiple lanes that can win and shove early. So you have some of your early game covered, as well as some late game insurance. The way Team Liquid is countering that here is the Ezreal Nami was pretty much the bread and butter lane for so many teams at Worlds, and there's two strong laners playing it. So if DoubleLift and Adrian can win that bottom lane, then the shoving Team Dignitas lanes for late game insurance doesn't work quite as well, and I think that's actually a lot of what this game's going to hinge on.
Both teams also with those big tanky top laners and assassins in the jungle. One point that a lot of the conversation has been around recently is the fact that North America had a lot of strength in its junglers, and while they were on these carries at the start of the season, while that favored them, changes and nerfs and differences in the game have kind of removed the power level from those. So we'll have to see how both these players can perform on those champions that are not what they used to be.
Exactly, and it's something everyone's having to adapt to right now. In this game, there should be a lot of importance put on the bot laners. The completely new Team Liquid dual lane with DoubleLift and Adrian on the Ezreal and Nami against the Caitlyn Lulu. So the Varus Jhin games may be becoming a thing of the past. Currently, that's something I'm okay with.
Yeah, I think we've seen enough Varus and Jhin, enough first ban Varus every single game to last us for a little while. So Varus can take a break, go ahead and sit the bench for a little bit, but a nice scenic view through Summoner's Rift as we load into game number 1, just taking a peek through the trees, checking out what all the turrets look like from the side. Dignitas and Team Liquid, though, the time for admiring the scenery is over. The time for securing your spot during the last couple of weeks of NALCS begins now. Heading out of the base, fanning out in the usual pattern that you're going to see him at level 1.
Yeah, a surprisingly high-stakes game right here. If Team Dignitas does beat Team Liquid in this best of 3, they're completely safe from the promotion tournament. The worst they would be able to finish would be 8th place. And we've also mentioned that Team Liquid is currently 2 wins out of having enough wins to qualify for playoffs. And since this is their easiest of their remaining opponents, which still include TSM, Phoenix One, and FlyQuest, it's a must-win for them as well.
Right. If you're looking at those 4 teams, if you're looking at Dignitas, FlyQuest, P1, and TSM, Dignitas and FlyQuest are probably the 2 most manageable if you're Team Liquid, considering FlyQuest's recent downward trend. So you've got to make sure you're focusing on these opportunities that present themselves as, hey, even if this isn't going to be easy, it's likely going to be easier than the alternatives.
Oh, absolutely.
Dignitas, though, would love to be sitting in a spot where the word relegation doesn't even come anywhere close to their minds, especially considering earlier on in this split chat, we were talking about how they had a rough time at the start. They were tied for last at one point.
It's been a wild ride for Team Dignitas as well, because at the very start of the split, when they had Ssumday and he was crushing top lane games, and Team Dignitas won their first set, nearly beat Cloud9, who had just shown themselves as being the early front runners in the split, people were thinking, wow, the acquisition of Ssumday, who historically in the last 2 or 3 years has almost always been top 3 top laners in the world, coming into Team Dignitas thinking, of course they're going to be this top tier NA team. And then they went on that massive losing streak, and sometimes you wonder, if a team is able to recover from those moments. And now you're not really sure what to think of Team Dignitas because they've had their ups and their downs, and they're right in that deciding point to split when they're 2 games below 500 and trying to race towards playoffs.
They've roller coastered so hard that nobody knows if we're heading for another crest or another valley, and it's just, where are they actually going to end up? A question on a lot of people's minds, especially the Dignitas fans who cheering for this team to be able to make the magic happen, but we'll have to see if they can do it up against Team Liquid and this almost completely new bottom lane. DoubleLift now with a little bit of experience with the team. Adrian now being brought in, like we mentioned, over Matt.
Yeah. The story of those guys is interesting as well. DoubleLift got in to start practicing with the team on Wednesday. As he was getting on his plane to join the Team Liquid house, he saw that they'd also signed Adrian, with the announcement being that they would start with Matt the week that they were playing. So Adrian, slightly less time on the team than DoubleLift. I'd imagine the majority of the practice last week was with Matt, but fairly early on into the last week of practice, they said they would be playing with Adrian. But even then, it's still like less than a week of full practice between Adrian and DoubleLift, and it's the history of these players to kind of build trust and feel like they have each other's backs that'll show here. But you can't imagine them having a built-in synergy since they're such a young bot lane as a pair.
Right. You're at this point in the split. You're at week 8. A lot of the teams have been playing together for a good long while, and you're coming in saying, okay, we just started 1 week ago, and now we've got this do-or-die situation that we've got to prove ourselves in. It's just like what we heard Dash and Ezreal kind of talking about. This can't be good 2 weeks from now. This has to be good now. Liquid, their bottom lane, currently shoved up underneath the turret, but that's kind of the reality of laning against Caitlyn a lot of the time. Yeah. Like you said, the Caitlyn Lulu lane going to be very strong for the side of Team Dignitas.
Yeah, the European LCS that just had a lot of their top teams squaring off had a final game of Sven and Mithy playing the Caitlyn and the Lulu, and not only did they shove down the first turret fairly early with help of a lot of bot lane ganks, they also then just kind of took it around the map and very early on in the game had a 3-turret-to-1 lead. Team Liquid's got to make sure they don't let something like that happen in this one. And honestly, the Ezreal Nami is something that can stand pretty well against that lane. It's just a matter of trying to get enough wave clear to make sure their turret doesn't fall.
Right, ReignOver hanging around here on the top side, sitting around just outside of vision in case they could get Ssumday to maybe go in there onto Lourlo, but he does not opt for that. So ReignOver is going to be forced to just walk himself away for now. And talking about, we kind of talked about Ssumday being this big power pickup for Dignitas, but Lourlo hasn't been a slouch for Team Liquid either. This is the one guy who, as Team Liquid's been trying to figure out their problems throughout this split, Lourlo's been kind of the guy who people weren't blaming so much. Everybody else kind of took a turn, but Lourlo avoided more of it.
It's true, and you really do actually have to hand it to Lourlo. When you look at Team Liquid from last year to now, everyone has changed positions or just is no longer on the team except for Lourlo. He's the one remaining member.
He's the rock.
So he's really the guy that Team Liquid in a sense has been almost building around, even though you're never looking at him as the star. Yet, in a lot of games, they are putting him in positions to be the primary carry, and in this game in particular, he drew 2 bans on carries. When you look at the way this guy started his LCS career, he was the tank player that just needed to play utility. So props to him. Got to go up against Ssumday, who's also having a relatively strong split, but mainly we got to focus on this bottom lane because I do feel like that's where the main point of contention will be in this early game.
Chaser hanging around here right now in this forward brush, likely not going to be given any opportunities to make any plays happen. The fan vote you saw on your screen just a couple of moments ago, 74, or it was 74 or 76. It was one of those 2 numbers. It was really close to 3/4 of people believe that Team Liquid is walking away with the win here.
Man,
that's a lot of faith.
Bold right there.
That is a lot of faith.
That 4-10 team, but the early game hasn't really showed us much yet. If we think about the overall team compositions, there is that late game insurance from Team Dignitas, assuming Laud has a good game. You're not going to be protecting an 0-4 Caitlyn that's going to carry a game because they're just not going to have enough gold. So a lot of this is on Team Liquid to hit the power spikes in between when Team Dignitas is going to have that protect the Caitlyn turning on.
Currently, both teams not doing anything too brave just yet. Level 6 coming online for solo laners and junglers all, though. Piglet getting himself caught out by the shockwave.
Ssumday's here too.
Finding some damage. It's a 3-man attempt in the mid lane. Piglet gonna go ahead, pop the Sanguine Pool, but they already got the first blood. ReignOver jumps his way into the fight. Gonna be explosive cast right back. And Keane makes it 2 for 0.
Such a good gank by Team Dignitas right there as well. Level 6 power spikes, so mid laners are gonna be trading ultimates. And Dignitas just throws everything at them. I loved the way Ssumday played that, because every time Gragas comes to gank your lane, it is a guessing game between body slam flash and being able to flash that spell. He flashed immediately after Piglet's Sanguine Pool was up. Now he's actually kind of caught up by Lourlo, though, and has nothing left.
Lourlo laying a smackdown onto him, but Ssumday still gets himself away and alive and feeling good, especially now that his team's up almost 1,500 gold from making that play in the mid lane. The coherent three-man effort pays off.
Yeah, such a great amount of execution to bring the game down to Keane's lane and get him going as well. So watching this, Piglet's already low from the engagement, but Ssumday has snuck around and Chaser's there, so there's no way Team Liquid can match this. And unless Piglet flashes immediately, Ssumday kind of covered both bases. He had the body slam for if Piglet was going to flash super instantly, and if he didn't, he was flashing down. Like, it was pretty what Ssumday just did.
Chaser now finding Piglet yet again. Sanguine Pool going to be used. Piglet trying to get himself away. There's your flash. I don't know if it's going to be enough. One more Clockwork Wind-Up, but red buff. Red Smite. Excuse me. Probably just both, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Either way, they get the kill again.
Yeah, and they're picking on Piglet right now. That was another smart gank from Chaser. The early game Rengar coming in big in this. It transitions immediately to the Infernal Drake. And this is one of the dangers, right? Orianna's already a strong laner. Lulu and Caitlyn have been shoving in, so now you're potentially having 2 to 3 winning lanes as well as the Infernal Drake. It's a tough snowball for Team Liquid to try and stop.
And let's talk about what we know about Piglet. This is a player who, if he's put in a spot where he's shut down early and kind of kept from being the carry that he wants to be, he's known to sort of tilt. And if that's what Dignitas can do to him early with repeated ganks and repeated focus, they might be able to put him into a state of poor mental focus.
Exactly.
To where he can't contribute.
I mean, if Piglet's been a player who has tilted as a marksman, the role he's played for 4 years straight, when you're in a less familiar environment in the mid lane, even though he has had good games there, I agree with you, tilt can be a big issue, but one of the stories here actually I feel like is VODS and Xpecial. They have the compositional advantage to be able to shove in, but the fact that they are just mostly 2v2 killing this turret is a huge boon for Team Dignitas when they have such big advantages in the other lanes.
Right. They've already got themselves a 2,000 gold lead. This turret is so close to dying, all they got to do is put one extra body down there. Or probably not even needing that. Just a couple more minion waves with LOD and Xpecial continuing to push up, and they'll find turret first blood as well. And the advantages just keep building and stacking for Team Dignitas, who also grabbed the first Infernal Drake that we saw. Everything is going their way in the early game.
Yeah, and a lot of it then comes down to mid-game decision-making, where so much of the game can still be decided. I mean, Team Liquid, with their first game with DoubleLift, had 3 kills within the first 4 minutes against Cloud9, and then Cloud9 has completely outmaneuvered them in the mid-game. Not exactly a good place for Team Liquid, a much better place for Team Dignitas, who has been surging lately and is out to a fantastic start.
So just has to staunch this bleeding for the time being, stop allowing Dignitas to play their game, find these successful plays, find these successful picks, especially on towards Piglet. The farm game being played by these teams, a 15 advantage for Lourlo in the top side, 25 advantage for Keane in the mid lane, though. You would kind of expect that after Piglet's been killed twice now. But
Yeah.
CS actually very, very similar between LOD and DoubleLift, even though DoubleLift's been under the turret the entire time, so not really keeping him away from any of those resources.
True, but if they get that turret, it's going to be so important. And Keane is just crushing Piglet right now. And the thing is, he's pushing with mostly impunity. This is the type of thing where you're going to be crying for your team to kind of relieve the pressure in your mid lane and want them to do it. But it's not...
Oh, not enough baby rage in the world to save you from that one.
But it's not realistic, is what I was going to say next. Because even if you gank, Piglet's basically dead before it happens. This is... Team Dignitas is running over this early game.
Dignitas just bulldozing everything on the side of Team Liquid from their mid laner to their bottom lane turret. Turret first blood going the way of Dig, bringing them up to a 3,500 gold lead 11 minutes in. Keane putting in work on this mid lane tier 1 as well. Chaser gonna walk himself over here and contribute to the effort so these guys can try to bring this one down real quick too if they can. A couple more auto attacks will seal the deal. And ReignOver sticks around a little bit too long. Chaser popping the ulti, looking to hunt him down if he can. Goes after him, flash for flash. The blast cone is not there in time. ReignOver not respecting, hanging around that turret.
And they're swinging this map lead across the entire map. Now they're going for Lourlo.
Now they're going for Lourlo. Ssumday's right there, already juggling him backwards, utilizing the power of the ulti. Lourlo's too tanky. They can't go underneath it for that one. But
yeah, you don't want to go too far, but Team Dignitas is putting forth just the right amount of controlled aggression. Keane playing with his advantage so well, and so much of this game is just expanding from the mid lane. Chaser has completely shut ReignOver down. Laud and Xpecial have kept DoubleLift and Adrian shoved in. This is a 5,000 gold lead in 12 minutes.
Yeah, that's honestly insane. 5,000 gold lead in 12 minutes, 5-0 kill score, 2 turrets to 0, 1 Drake to 0. There's just a big bunch of zeros on the side of Team Liquid, and those are not acceptable at this point. They gotta find some way to get themselves onto the board somehow.
Yeah, these are the type of matches that have turned into perfect games in the past. I mean, we define, at least amongst ourselves, perfect games as no Drakes, no turrets, no deaths, as far as what you've given up. And they're exceedingly rare. But 5,000 gold lead 13 minutes in, and with how well Team Dignitas is playing, it's going to be tough for Team Liquid to come back here.
And Dignitas is just so adept this game at taking an advantage and finding another advantage out of it. You're not seeing any of these plays just be, oh, okay, they got a kill, nothing else happened. Kills are turning into more kills. Kills are turning into Drakes. Turrets are turning into kills. There's just so much happening in this almost domino-style sequence.
Yeah, and you look at Team Liquid and you wonder where is the advantage supposed to come from for them. They were hoping that DoubleLift and Adrian would be able to kind of out-sustain and weave enough skill shots into Laud and Xpecial to win that lane. That didn't happen. Piglet got ganked by Chaser, and Orianna's already a super strong laner early game against the Vladimir, so Vladimir's more of a mid to late game power spike, but he's now down 2 levels, so that's not going to happen. And Lourlo, despite the first pick Nautilus, has been completely outroamed by Ssumday, so across the board, it's been a 3-lane victory for Team Dignitas.
Keane is just 1v2 zoning away ReignOver and Piglet from this tier 2. Now he's got the rest of Dignitas rotating up towards him to keep the push alive. Trap's going to be stepped on, and Adrian is caught. Dignitas finds themselves 1 for free. Not going to find anything else right now, but Team Liquid is just not able to stabilize this.
Yeah, as well as Team Dignitas playing the early game, great. This is one of the strengths of the Orianna, Lulu, Caitlyn composition. You have shielding if they engage on you, but your siege is immaculate. You have the zoning of the traps, you have the zoning of the Orianna ball. There's not many places you can step to defend this, and then on top of that, you have the longest natural range of an AD carry in the game, pinging the turret down, and Team Dignitas played that seed great. Obviously, Adrian shouldn't have stepped on that trap, but you can see how instant the punishment was from Team Dignitas.
Timing couldn't be better either. They're going to walk out of the enemy jungle, taking away the blue buff, rotate themselves right down towards the Drake, pick that up as well. And everything keeps coming up Team Dignitas now. 6,500 gold ahead, 14 minutes in. DoubleLift with his mana move completed, so at least he's got one item sort of online. He's still got to work on stacking it though, and look at Piglet's itemization, Jatt. He's got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, DoubleLift still hasn't converted his call. Piglet, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, it's
Spirit Visage first against the Orianna. I mean, that's another reason why he's getting smashed so hard. You have to be able to build defensively when you're behind in lane in order to split, and that is something that can come with experience in the mid lane. We've seen a lot of successful Vladimirs not straight up rush damage items like Piglet is doing here, but that's a compounding factor to this win so far from Team Dignitas.
You would think that you would go for the tank item when you're 0-3-0 and down 50
magic.
CS.
At least a single magic resist item.
Something to prevent Keane from just being able to have this 1 versus 1 kill threat on you at all times.
Especially when Piglet has ruined no magic resistance. He's, I believe, gone with cooldown. He hasn't even gone with cooldown reduction. I'll have to check after the game what his runes down because he's at 0% CDR.
Just AP?
Wait.
Flat AP Quint, scaling AP Glyph?
He may not have runes, but we'll check on that afterwards.
That would definitely be an interesting spin on this. Piglet in the mid lane, you can see the stats there on your screen. Average gold difference at 15, -288. This game, -2,904, so only about 10 times as much. Definitely not the kind of start that he was looking for to bring Team Liquid victory in week number 8.
I got clarification. He does have runes. There's scaling AP runes.
Called it!
On blue. So good job, Cap Flowers. That is a thing you can do, but this is not exactly the Vladimir build of choice for 0-3 Vladimir's. Luden's Echo Rush. Tough to play when you're down.
Very, very much so, especially now that he's so far behind in not just the kill game, but the farm game. He's just bleeding out profusely. 178 to 115. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And we saw his performance against Echo Fox and Froggen previously, where Froggen had a massive CS lead over Piglet.
Piglet has definitely had some good games and some highlight plays on mid lane, but he has had a couple of games like this now where he just gets absolutely massacred. Big teleport coming in from Lourlo. It might get interrupted by Gragas.
Ssumday
Nope.
not interrupting it. Ssumday still has his own TP available, but his team has managed to just sort of exit stage left, and Liquid's not able to collapse in time. Lourlo's still looking to start things off. Chaser going to be grabbed up, flashes himself away. Teleport and flash used by Lourlo in exchange for a flash from Keane and Chaser, while Ssumday is just hanging out bottom side, putting some more damage onto the turrets.
Yep, smart play by Team Dignitas, knowing they have the disengage from the Caitlyn, Lulu, and Orianna. It just gives Ssumday a bunch of extra free time to chip away at another turret.
No reason to take him out of that lane. Also allows him to catch up a little bit further in farm of his own, considering Lourlo did have a pretty nice lead for himself earlier. But when you're the one who's behind, sometimes you got to make those sacrifices. When your team is behind, you have to sacrifice your individual economy to say, hey, we can try to make some kind of a play. But when Dig walks away with it, feels bad.
Nautilus, as far as a team composition, is the main playmaker in there. So you can see why Lourlo wanted to try and make that play. It just wasn't there. So puts him a little bit further behind.
And these Drake spawns are just merciless too. Infernal into Mountain into Infernal again will be the next one. So a lot of pain is going to be heading the way of Team Liquid if Dignitas is allowed to continue picking these up for free. Look at the items completed on these guys. An entire Morello Namicon up for Keane's Orianna over Piglet's Vladimir. He's got the Luden's Echo completed now as well. Black Cleaver done on Chaser means he's going to be shredding the armor of Lourlo, who honestly hasn't even built any yet.
Yeah, that's a tough one right there.
That's one way to put it.
There's a lot of people that can get blown up on the side of Team Liquid, for sure.
At least the Caitlyn is not fully online yet. Only Runaan's Hurricane. Still putting those pieces of the Infinity Edge together. DoubleLift with the Ninja Tabby that you're starting to see become more and more common on AD carries. Working towards the Trinity Force as well. Could potentially be an Iceborne, you never know, but these days Trinity Force is the usual pick. Team Liquid is just stuck so far underneath their own turrets. You can see them trying to put vision down on their own side of the map. But there's no reason for either one of these teams to have any vision on the Dignitas side of the map because everything is happening on the Liquid side right now.
Yeah, it really is. And you can see Team Dignitas actually doesn't want to push too hard right now. Sometimes you could say you want to go and siege down the inner tier of turrets. But they just take a Rift Herald for a little bit of extra oomph right now before Baron spawns, and it also allows Laud to go back and get his Infinity Edge. I think now is the point where Team Dignitas is just going to go to make their next play. They're getting wards, they know Infernal Drake is coming up, they're going to secure that and then continue their push.
You got to respect the call to not go too deep onto the tier 2 turrets, to not set yourself up for a, well, I think this is kind of dumb, but we don't have anything else to do, so let's do it anyway type of play. Those are the kinds of things that throw away 7,000 gold leads at 20 minutes into the match, and Dignitas is not willing to succumb to that. They're wanting to play this slow and steady and find the advantages when they are really advantages. Drake spawning in about 45 seconds. Dignitas will just be shoving up like we were kind of talking about, getting control over every bit of the map as that will be coming up. They've got 3 people in the top side. Laud the one with that Runaan's Hurricane and Infinity Edge now done. He's got plenty of pushing potential, especially with Xpecial hanging around to keep him safe. And Chaser nearby to turn any sort of a fight that Liquid might try to go for here. Ssumday continually splitting in that bot lane. Remember, he has TP still available. Lourlo's about 30 seconds off coming back up.
Yeah, and that is something that is also preventing Team Liquid from making plays, is if TL try and engage A, they kind of can because they're walking through Orianna and Caitlyn. But on top of that, if they expose themselves, they're going to get engaged on by Ssumday and Chaser from the flank.
You can see on the screen that just showed up, Dignitas currently 7-4 when they have a lead at 20 minutes into the game. So the stats favor them. The game currently favors them as well. Ssumday just deciding he doesn't even need his jungler. He can solo down this Infernal Drake. A Gragas with the Spirit Visit and Sunfire Cape both completed at this point in time. Pretty tough dude.
Pretty tough to kill. Not the fastest killer of things.
But when you control the whole map,
it helps.
Yeah, just a little bit. When your opponents can't come anywhere even remotely close to you. ReignOver trying to fire off some of those rockets. He did go ahead and evolve the spike second, especially since these guys are on the defensive. You want to make sure you can get as much poke as you can to kind of ward them away.
Yeah, there's no resetting jumps that ReignOver is easily able to get. Still waiting on item power spikes from Team Liquid. You will want Team Dignitas to pick this up a little bit because they had, 5,000 or 6,000 gold lead 7 minutes ago. But that is something that I like about these team compositions that have the Caitlyn, Lulu, and Orianna is if they're not rushing to end the game off of winning lanes, they're still going to have a late game Caitlyn with a bunch of shields that is still super effective. So there's no rush, and Team Dignitas can just try and make a smart play.
Ssumday jumping himself on the wall. Tidal Wave going to be thrown out. Looking to make this team fight happen if they can. Ssumday going to be tanking. ReignOver finding himself auto attack to death. Vlad grabbing the kill. It's a 1-for-1. Chaser falls 2. Jungler for jungler. Piglet looking to make the damage onto Lod. Dignitas have to get themselves out of here. The fight has gone sour. Now they're able to find Piglet, maybe. Sanguine Pool not going to be jumped away from, but DoubleLift able to grab 1 kill as well. Xpecial grabbing the return kill onto him. Lod barely staying alive. Over the wall he goes. And Lourlo has now bit off more than he can chew. Dignitas on their way out. Looks like they got caught, but they turn it right back around.
Yeah, a pretty messy fight considering the lead that Team Dignitas had going in, but they still come out on top, as you mentioned, 4-2, some very close margins towards the end of this fight. Watching it again, Ssumday doesn't get the initiation he wants, and then I actually don't like it when Lulu's ult their tank right as he initiates. This lowers their shielding on the back end, and Chaser and Xpecial are very low right now, and Xpecial has nothing with which to save him. Piglet doesn't necessarily get the greatest flank. You can see his scaling AP starting to have a little bit of an impact. Down the stretch here, Keane flashing while the pool is still up. Pretty risky, but he timed his shockwave just right. Then, a few things here. Watch Lourlo missing his Q onto Lauder that may have allowed them to close the kill. When it did not, it just made Lourlo get chased down and killed pretty easily.
Team Liquid thought they had found success in that fight. They chased it as hard as they could, but now Dignitas might be looking to send Chaser in, make this happen. Ssumday on the flank, coming around from behind. TP from Lourlo too, but he's isolated. The rest of the team's nowhere nearby to be helping, at least not for a couple more seconds. Lourlo's going to be killed before anything else even happens. ReignOver going to be thrown back with the shockwave. 2 dead on the side of Liquid. Adrian's going to be number 3. Ssumday grabbing the killing spree on that one. 3-for-0 for Dignitas. They're all set up around the Baron pit as well. Ace in the hole going to be fired off. Piglet is not in the kind of spot he wants to be in. Ssumday closing in. Body slam not going to be finding him, but the barrel does, and Keane picks up yet another.
Yeah, that might be the fight that seals the deal. Lourlo tried so hard to get an initiation, and that was one of those situations where your initiation in a vacuum is great. He knocked out 4 people with his ultimate, but the team just wasn't in a position to follow up. And that led to a pretty clean fight win for Team Dig.
Very clean fight for Team Dignitas, taking the Baron off the back of it. 12,000 gold, Jatt, at 25 minutes.
That's a lead.
Is that possible to win?
Yeah, it's so interesting. We have these, what is their record with a gold lead at 25 minutes? It's like, whoa, they're 8-4. What is the record with a 10,000 goal lead at 25 minutes? Probably undefeated for most teams.
I would guess for most teams.
Yeah, if they can get it. So watching this fight, it's a double TP for both top laners, both actually attempting the flank. So Ssumday was distracting Team Liquid, whereas Lourlo was actually getting hit by Team Dignitas. So as far as the effectiveness of those TP flanks, Ssumday wins the day there. Team Dignitas did take a little bit of damage, but it didn't matter because of how far ahead they are, and Ssumday is completely untouched. So even though there's a few low members on Team Dignitas, nowhere was Team Liquid actually close to a kill. And now with the Baron buff, it's going to be a very tall task for Team Liquid to stop an inhibitor in the middle.
Baron buff, a 3,000 HP Gragas, a lot of Caitlyn traps, shields from both Orianna and Lulu, as you mentioned, plenty of times already. This is a team that is a very scary thing to have sieging up outside of your base, outside of your inhibitor turrets. But that's the reality Liquid has right now, firing off the tidal wave. Adrian looking for the bubble, going to be fighting that one on to Lod, who has to get himself away. Redemption going to be channeled, ultimate from Lourlo, but Piglet has already been killed. The cast comes back, Adrian drops, and Dignitas is looking to end this one pre-30 minutes. One more shot on a DoubleLift should do it. Lourlo going to be body blocking the ace in the hole, but the inhibitor falls in bottom lane. Dignitas still 5 men strong, pushing onto the next.
Yeah, desperation engaged there by Team Liquid. Near 0 chance of winning that team fight, and Team Dignitas might just push to the end.
ReignOver is just sitting off to the side, knows there's nothing he can do, no way he can possibly jump into this. Fires off the Void Spikes, but what are those going to contribute to anything? You've still got 5 seconds on Adrian, 5 seconds on Piglet. And in a very impressive, very dominant showing, Dignitas is going to take game number 1.
And there it is.
And there we go. I almost went a little bit too early, but Dignitas walks away with the win, and they look damn fine doing it.
Yeah, they had a lot of momentum from week to week, having winning against CLG as well as Echo Fox. And you always wonder whether or not a team is going to be able to keep that going moving into the next week. And at least for this game, Team Dignitas not only kept momentum, they built on it, because that was a complete stomp of Team Liquid. We've had very few games that end this early with this big of a gold deficit. So super impressive there by Team Dig.
And just from start to finish, that very first play in the mid lane, the 3-man play into the double kill, Dignitas, where they were just all on the same page. They all knew exactly what they wanted to do. There were no times where you were really looking at this game and being like, all right, it seems like they're kind of confused, they're kind of lost, they don't know what they want to do next. It was just boom, 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 and it was done.
Yeah, that's not one of those games where you look at a team that is just on the edge of playoffs and they get a big lead and you think, well, they got that. What are they going to do with it? And then they kind of meander around and you think this team doesn't know what they're doing. No, like the way they closed this game, even though they were up against an opponent that has a very new roster and has been last place for most of the split, looked very good. And that's the type of game that gets you hyped for the chances of Team Dignitas later in the split, maybe even in the playoffs.
Well, for more on that dominating win from Team Dignitas, let's send things over to the analysts.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ezreal, there is quite a lot to unpack here. Not a pretty game for Team Liquid, and a very dominant victory coming out of Team Dignitas at the start of our series here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this one was pretty much a disaster from the get-go. I mean, yes, the draft, I think, is fine. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can talk about as far as the rising priority of Lulu. You know, I know you were talking about, and I think that's something that's become so big in the NALCS. These sort of protect the AD carry comps are really rising, and that was showcased very well here, but the game was not about that.
Exactly. The game was all centered around the mid lane. A really intelligent roam from Team Dignitas, bringing the top lane and the jungler here. 3-man gank onto Piglet, who opted for very aggressive summoner spells here in the game. Means an early first death and kind of sets Keane rolling for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a great early play from Dignitas that does set them up, but there's a lot of stuff to question here. Okay, he goes Ignited instead of Ghost, so most people are going to play for a more defensive mastery there. Doesn't have it available, probably could have avoided some of these deaths with that. He also doesn't go Storm Raiders, he goes Deathfire. He goes full scaling AP instead of scaling CDR, no MR ruined at all either there. So he's going super, super aggressive. Then it's like, okay, sweet, I just got first blooded. I'm down a lot in CS.
What do I buy?
Rod, right? Like, almost everyone goes Spirit Visage first in these sorts of AP matchups because Vlad's early game sucks. You need the CDR, you need the magic resist and the increased regen to be able to kind of sustain through those lanes. And then you get to this point where you're almost, they don't hurt you anymore and you can start to fight back, right? I mean, so he went super aggressive in all ways. He goes for Ignite, which he literally didn't use until 26 minutes in the game.
In an unwinnable situation. Yeah.
So the whole thing was just a disaster, and he was so far behind that it's like, the stuff that's happening in the other lanes almost doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, I think the big takeaway from the other lanes would be that, hey, cool, we get to see kind of how Lulu and Caitlyn is a very powerful pushing lane, even into the likes of a Nami, who is normally a pretty lane dominant champion. Okay, great. We're seeing the effectiveness of those two champions and maybe the changing landscape of the ADCs. But outside of that, yeah, you can't really look at the play too much. DoubleLift was last hitting just fine under turret in the top lane. Okay, Ssumday made a really intelligent roam down, but Lourlo wasn't necessarily losing that lane in the 1v1. So all of the focus there around the mid lane and the junglers as well. If we're going to look at the junglers maybe briefly, we can talk about ReignOver on the Kha'Zix not having much of a presence, you know, to go up against Chaser in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, he really wasn't able to get much done. And anytime you're playing Rengar and you're able to basically free farm to level 6 and the Kha'Zix hasn't done anything yet at this point, you are so happy about that. And not only that, but he makes his first ultimate work, which is so important to get that snowball rolling. And you know, just to put it in perspective how badly Piglet is losing, he was down just about 3,000 gold at 15 minutes, not his team.
Right, him individually.
As a player, individually, down, and he's still building in towards a Luden's Echo. And what is his second item? It's not a Spirit Visage.
Nope.
He starts building towards a Death Cap as a second item. I just don't know what's happening there. Like,
right. And so this is where we get to, again, we don't want to take anything away from Dignitas here because they took their lead and they ran with it. I mean, we were close to having our first perfect game of the split there. And so again, all credit to Dignitas for what they accomplished in this game. But if we're looking at Team Liquid and the story of this organization here in 2017, man, it is almost getting worse when you consider the names that they're bringing in.
Yeah.
At this roster on paper, Lourlo, ReignOver, Piglet, DoubleLift, Adrian. At the beginning of the split, I probably would have told you this is a top 4 team, even with the role swap to mid game or to mid lane, and yet none of that's coming to fruition.
And I mean, what it really does showcase is that League of Legends is a team game. You have probably the most expensive roster in either of the EU or NALCS, probably,
Right.
I would imagine, by quite a bit.
Yes.
So they have bought up a lot of talent, but if the team does not have time to work together and does not gel really well as a team, it doesn't matter how many good individual players you have. And I mean, they barely scraped by Envy, they get blasted by Cloud9.
Yep.
They looked awful in Game 1 against Dignitas. We'll see if they can rebound.
I was saying, we hear about how the new changing, morale in Dignitas, everything's, upward trend for them there. A win like this is only probably going to propel them further. Player of the game going to Keane this time around. Team helps him get rolling, but then he absolutely takes over the game himself.
Yeah, and keeps it rolling from last week. He looked great last week. He was super dominant in this Game 1 as well. Obviously, I think he had some help from Piglet.
Yep.
But he had some help from the rest of his team, too. But he also just played great. I mean, once he had blue buff, he had his lost chapter. You could see him bullying out and getting that solo kill very, very well.
Yep.
He played aggressively. I think throughout the game, he hit great shockwaves in team fights, very well timed on Piglet coming out of the pool and things like this. So he played great across the board.
Right.
And in a world where Keane is playing this well, Ssumday has been performing solidly, and the bot lane is scary. It's like, this is a frightening team.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look towards playoffs, and the top end of the standings, you're looking at people like Jensen and Bjergsen across from him in the mid lane. So he's going to need to have continued performances like this for Dignitas to find success. When we come back, we'll see if Team Dignitas can close out the series 2-0 or if Team Liquid will recover in Game 2. Join us here after the break.
I played ADC today.
Alright, this is the winning team fight
Give
right
me
here.
Kate, guys, or
I
Adrian.
saw Piglet practicing AD carry
Come
this
on,
morning.
dude. I saw your Kate in Game 5 versus CLG.
Wait,
One more Caitlyn.
Piglet gonna go ahead, pop the Sang with Pool, but they already got the first blood. ReignOver jumps his way into the fight, gonna be explosive cast right back. Chaser popping the ulti, looking to hunt him down if he can. Goes after him, flash for flash.
Flash, no flash.
Having night. I'm shield
Maybe, maybe.
I know
이지려. 이지려, flash. Nice.
Piglet has already been killed. The cast comes back, Adrian drops, and Dignitas is looking to end this one pre-30 minutes.